you may notice some challenges with the audio and video of this particular episode. Johnathan Lee Iverson was gracious enough to agree to have a conversation with me and interrupt his day. So he's on his way to pick up his wife, and he had some great insights for us. So enjoy this episode of Living Life Juicy. Welcome to the Living Life Juicy podcast, where we explore how we can be present and kind as we go about doing great things. Today, we're talking with Johnathan Lee Iverson. Classically trained to sing opera at only 22, he became the youngest, the first New Yorker, and the first African-American ringmaster in the near 150-year history of Ringling Bros and Barnum Bailey Circus. He lived his life, met his wife, started a family while living out of a train car. I met him a month ago at a conference called The Thing Live. He spoke for about 30 minutes. What struck me was how his presence was enhanced by his humility. Hey, Johnathan, thank you for being here and talking with us. I know you're calling from your car and you're waiting to pick up your wife, but I look forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Hey, what's going on in your world right now?
Right now, it's audition season out here in Central Florida. I've been running crazy in a good way. For any performing artist, that's a good thing. I've been going from one audition to the next, everything from Opera Orlando to Disney theme park, and some theater as well, the Garden Theater, and theaters all over the state are holding auditions for their seasons. And also, various different event companies. There are a lot of conferences and conventions and special events that venture down this way. And so there are a lot of companies looking for hosts and looking for ring announcers, looking for all sorts of things. So there's interesting opportunities and pockets of opportunities all over this place.
Well, I'm looking forward. What we're going to talk about today is how you got from living on a train. Well, first of all, how you got to living on a train to living in Orlando.
Right.
Let's start way back when. When did you first start performing?
I would say, well, officially, I started performing when I was around 12 years old with the Boys Choir of Harlem. But unofficially, I'd say maybe 5 or 4 years old in church and various places like that.
Yeah.
It was just something that always seemed to come easy to me, whether it was speaking, whether it was acting, whether it was singing. Mostly singing was the big chunk of my life and has been the big bulk of my life. Being able to sing and travel the country, it's just been a real privilege.
Yeah. So where does the son of a firefighter from Trinidad and Tobago get a passion for singing?
From a mother from Arkansas. My father, God rest his soul, he used to, men, we have these egos. So he used to, swear all my talents came from him. And there's some truth to that, but definitely the music came from my mother's side of the family. As legend has it, it was my grandfather who was quite the singer. He was also an ordained minister, but from what I understand, he was quite the singer. And I remember receiving a videotape back when we had VHS from my family when I was on the road, and they were at a family reunion. And on this VHS, I discovered that whole side of my family, everybody can sing. And, everybody, they were just kind of having an impromptu jam session and everybody could sing. And I said, oh, okay. So that's where it comes from. So it's definitely my mother's end of the spectrum.
What did you get from your dad's side?
I think I definitely, it's funny. If you looked at my mother and father together, people would probably mistaken them for brother and sister. They had a wonderful friendship. And it was a complicated relationship, but they really had this interesting connection. If I stood next to my father, I look just like him. Stand next to my mother, I look like her twin. So it was really an interesting blend. I think for my father, I definitely get, um, I definitely get his magnetism. He was a very, I would say he was a very charismatic man. Even he was just firefighter, but firefighters are studs anyway, right?
Yeah.
But he had, I didn't realize it until I went to his memorial service how um, well loved and how much of a pillar he was in his particular part of the community. It was fascinating. I met guys my age who had all these great stories about him. And, I remember seeing grown men, burly men, firefighters, and, men from every walk of life who were in tears, because he died suddenly.
Oh,
And they were just beside themselves. I mean, he was the kind of guy, other men literally, there was a firefighter on his, who he worked with, he painted a portrait of him, you know. I mean, he was that kind of person, he just had this glow about him. And so I think in many respects that held me in good stead when I got to the circus, because you got to have something when your coworkers 4-ton elephants.
yeah. Yeah. Well, much appreciation for your dad. I'm involved in a festival. It's there's International Hot Sauce Festival and Cornhole Tournament. It's called the Old Boney Mountain Hot Summer Night, and it's a
Okay.
benefit for the Grossman Burn Foundation, which supports burn victims or burn survivors, and a lot of firefighters and firefighter families are benefited by that foundation.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
I'm doing the sound and getting all the performers lined up. We have a live stage, and we get a couple of different bands up or singers and performers up there to do some stuff on that. It's a fun thing. If you've got Caribbean roots, what's your thought on hot sauce? Do you like hot sauce?
Oh, I'm not a hot sauce person, but my father could eat fire.
Yeah.
I it actually grew on me. Lately, it's a thing for me. And so that's something that grew on me. I was totally not about that when I was younger, and up until recently, I just certainly have a taste for it. And it's funny, the older I get, I mature into him in strange ways. I scared myself a couple of days ago. I just, sometimes you just pop up and you're waking up and you look in a mirror. And I was like, wow, I was just like looking at his face.
I catch myself doing stuff and go, "Oh no, that's my dad." And it's a
Yeah,
great thing. I mean, I would love to be confused for him, but it's kind of scary when you're the kid. I mean,
right.
if you're ever out in California, I'll get you. I'll treat you to some amazing hot sauce that you would find. It's a great spectrum of heat from banana strawberry hot sauce, which really isn't hot. It's just spicy and it's sweet, and it goes on ice cream and oatmeal, to another one called Jarhead Red, which is it's the burn your mouth off type, but it has great
Wow,
flavor. So
that's
we'll find one
fascinating.
for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to burn my mouth off.
So tell me this. Let's get back into your childhood. Tell me about when you first heard Placido Domingo.
I was 13. I was in Japan. I was with the Boys Choir of Harlem, and I didn't know him from a ham sandwich. And my 13th year was really my coming out year. I was really just middle school for me was I was a superstar in middle school. I was really brilliant. I didn't watch TV, and it helped because my brain was very awake. I didn't have the digital distractions that slow us down now. I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of studying, but I remember being so focused when I was that age. And it paid off. It really did pay off. I mean, I was on an honor roll so much, they just would keep my name on the wall. And, we would have the end of the year commencements and ceremonies and awards. And I remember just, I just was clean. It was a clean sweep for me. I was having a great year, and I was 13 years old. And this trip, this tour that we all knew about was coming up. It was a tour to Japan. And in the Boys Choir for Harlem, being an elite choir, You had to earn it. And what the director would do, his name was Dr. Walter J. Turnbull, a great, great, great man, the late, great Dr. Walter J. Turnbull, who founded the Boys Choir. He would have one soprano, one alto, one tenor, one bass. And that's how you had to audition. So everybody had to know their parts individually. And it could be nerve-wracking, but you had to audition. And I remember working so hard to just know the rep and know the show. And my brother gave me some good advice. He's like, look, don't get up there and get overwhelmed with everything. Just take it one step at a time. You actually know the whole show. Just, whatever they throw at you, you'll be able to do it. Just take, he told me about the method, just ABC, just think like that, one step at a time. And so they would randomly pick out various reps. And we had a really robust repertoire for a boy choir, and it spanned from classical to spirituals to gospel to jazz and to popular music, to folk songs. We even had there was a Japanese song we would do for the encore when we were out there. That the Japanese were very welcoming and very supportive, and they just loved the show. I remember there was one show in Nagoya, Japan, where they rushed the stage. I'll never forget that. I felt like a rock star. They literally rushed the stage. The energy was so amazing. But this particular concert was a special concert. It was a friendship concert between the Japanese and Ronald and Nancy Reagan. And I remember the announcement, the MC, and Ronald and Nancy Reagan's favorite tenor, Placido Domingo. And I'd been summoned by an older gentleman in the boys choir who said, listen, I want you to hear what a real tenor sounds like. And back then I was a baby tenor. And he came out and he began to sing, and I remember it was the energy of it was so tremendous. It was like literally all my cells lit up, and like I was just clear that, man, that's what I want to do. When I heard him, it just blew my mind. It was like, wow, nothing mattered after that. I mean, I went home and went full-fledged. That's what I want to do. And seeing him was really eye-opening. And of course, throughout my career, I've heard similar stories, people who've gotten into opera or even in other fields, how live theater was the thing that drew them in. I've met everybody from costume designers who knew, oh my goodness, I want to design, to clowns who, they went to circus when they were a kid and they knew that's what I am. Yeah. And there's something magical and really powerful about being that young and finding out what you are. And there's something even more encouraging to be in an environment where you're applauded and your ambitions are fed, and they're encouraged even beyond your own doubts, because you don't get into this kind of field without doubts, without second guessing. And I was very, 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 very fortunate that I had so many people, far more people, the people who were in my cheering section in a legitimate way, in a very tangible way. Not just, oh, I hope you accomplish that, but were like, no, you have to do that. No, this is really for you. You really have promised to do that. And who would talk me out of my doubt. I remember college, I would just, the first year of college is tremendous. You're not sure. And my mother really gave me a really good talking to where it kept me on track to what I wanted to do. And she said to me, I'll never forget it. She said, you don't know what doors will open, but you need to focus on that, what you are about right now. And she was right.
Well, it seems like your experience with Placido Domingo gave you a target to shoot for. How did that impact your choice of schools? You chose LaGuardia Arts and a Hart School. what impact did that have on your focus for career?
Yeah, again, I was really, if I were to have that experience, it could have been in a better environment. I was already in a Boys Choir of Harlem, which was an elite group, and we already thought we were the bee's knees. And to already be in that environment where that was encouraged, and you just had excellence all around you, it was very easy. It was easy to know which high school to choose. Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of Music and Art, Performing Arts. It was easy to select the conservatory I would go to, or what school I was going to go to for college. It was sort of like, once, it's like Placido Domingo opened the book, right? And then, I just had all of these wonderful mentors, and I had this great environment that helped me turn the pages, helped me to determine certain steps. I just had a lot of advantages, to be really frank with you. I mean, even in a Boys Choir of Harlem, my goodness, it took me years to actually realize the privilege I had there. I mean, we had world-class instructors who themselves were accomplished in many different fields. And I mean, it was just tremendous. I mean, we had guest conductors who were known all over the world, and guest coaches who were known all over the world and in the industry, who were working with us and who were familiar with us, who were familiar with each character, and who were very comfortable in sharing with us how special music was to them. It was nothing for us as boys to see grown men, while they were conducting, crying. And, that wasn't like that we understood it.
Yeah.
We got it. It was a beautiful thing. I mean, like, to see, I think that it did something to us as young boys, to see grown men be so impassioned about the arts, and about excellence.
Have you ever heard the phrase, a rising tide lifts all ships?
Yes.
And that, to me, it seems like what you were doing is you jumped in the deep end, where the quality and the excellence and the passion around you lifted you up to that higher level. And you ended up surrounding yourself with amazing people, and you impacting others in the same way that they're impacting you.
Well, I'd like to believe that, but I was really pulled in. Nothing in my life is something I planned, or, I mean, I'm real careful with plans, because I really think God is a comedian, and for some reason, like, he always ups me. It's almost like I sincerely feel like he waits for me to come up with some plan, just to go, okay, I'm gonna top that. I couldn't have dreamt up the Boys Choir of Harlem experience. No way. The people I would end up meeting and working with, and the level of artistry and the level of stature a lot of these people had, was just out of this world. It was nothing I could even fathom. I mean, I am a testament to the phrase, youth is wasted on the young. Because I remember we would be around so many luminaries all the time, to the point where I didn't realize I had sang with Tony Bennett at least 3 or 4 times. And I didn't, like, it just, we were at the Waldorf Astoria, of all places. And Tony Bennett, he was very laid back, very cool, very nice, very cordial. But he was just, back when but he was just some old white guy to me. I mean, it, like, it didn't even, compute. I'm like, this is the great Tony Bennett. It took me until I got older to go. But we were around that kind of company all the time. And so it's just kind of like, okay, I just came from school. I got to go to the Waldorf Astoria to sing with Tony.
Dang it. That's so hard.
Yeah.
There's a proverb. Yeah, there's a proverb that says, man makes his plans, but God directs the steps. And those steps will lead you someplace else. So here's the next question.
Yeah.
How does a 22-year-old classically trained opera singer become the ringmaster of one of the most famous circuses of all time?
That, again, that's, God being funny. I went in for, my plan was to continue in opera. I was, this was my path. And I was certain I didn't want to go to graduate school. And my thoughts on conservatory have matured in a very unorthodox way. And I'm hearing more of that from a lot of fellow artists, how in many respects, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I think there's something to be said about experience. You want to learn your craft, definitely, but I don't think the conservatory system is really serving, it's not serving artists to their best interest. I think like the entire university and college system, it's become a business. Everything's become a business. And when it becomes a business and it's about, funds, eventually someone gets shortchanged, and it's usually the student. I was talking to someone today, and she said it. She said, she literally just dropped out because there were no classes in her conservatory that were really preparing her for what she wanted to do. And now she's 34,000 in debt.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, it just becomes a big business. And so my plan was really to go to Europe right after I graduated. I met a wonderful teacher. And so we planned to go to Europe. And basically what we were going to do was we were going to really study the craft even more and work, and develop, because opera is like athletics. You don't just put anybody out there. That's why I hate these shows with the 12-year-old opera singer. There are no 12-year-old opera singers. You have a kid manipulating their voice who will be ruined by the time they're 14, 15 years old. You have to, opera is the zenith, it is the Mount Olympus of vocal music. And just like athletics, you can have a kid who's a wonder in the Golden Gloves, but you don't put him in a professional ring, with the heavyweight champion of the world. It's just a big gulf there, no matter how gifted they may be. The reality is your body has to do certain things. And that's the thing with the voice. We forget that, and we don't teach that enough, that the voice is an actual organic instrument, and it has to grow. And more importantly, there are certain experiences you just have to have. I often muse that there were two Frank Sinatras, okay? Pre-Ava Gardner and post-Ava Gardner. And pre-Ava Gardner was very innocent, and he was smooth sound. If you listen to Frank Sinatra before Ava Gardner came into his life, there was this really smooth, almost like his voice was like, it was like butter, it was just smooth. It was kind of a tribute to Bing Crosby, but just more sensual. It was this lovely tone to his voice, right? After Ava Gardner, after he hemorrhaged, after he wanted to kill himself, after life kicked him in the hind parts, that's the Frank Sinatra everybody listens to at any point in their life. There's a grit to him, you feel those songs, you know what I mean? And that's how it is with the arts, especially singing, because you can't fool your audience. They can tell if you've lived something or you really are telling the truth, because that's really that's the goal of any artist, actor, singer, dancer, is to tell the truth. Nobody really cares about what conservatory or what your training was. They want to hear, and they want to feel the truth. And so the plan was to go to Europe. I was trying to raise funds. I happened to do an audition for dinner theater, and unbeknownst to me, the director of the dinner theater was also directing Ringling Brothers. And I get this strange call from Feld Entertainment, the owners of Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, right after the audition for the dinner theater. And he informed me, look, we want you for this dinner theater. It was Fireside Dinner Theater's Christmas show out in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. But they said, would you mind coming in to audition for Ringmaster of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey? I already knew the brand. I knew the name. Being a New Yorker, you would. I went to Ringling Brothers shows every time they came to Madison Square Garden. It was tradition. It was part of your life. never in a million years did it never even crossed my hemisphere that that's a career. That's something you do. Circus people to me were just otherworldly, like everybody else. They're just otherworldly. They come in and there's this, week of wonder, and then all of a sudden they're gone, and the Knicks are back to playing basketball. You know, that's how it was. And they emphasized to me, they made it very clear, and they were so adamant. They said, we want a singing ringmaster. We want a real singing ringmaster. And I learned very quickly that Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, in fact, had a tremendous musical legacy. Um, look up personalities like P.G. Lowry. You know, the list goes on. Harold Ronk, who was the original singing ringmaster. And there's so many different luminaries and personalities, even up into modern times, who just these tremendous musical legacies. Eric Michael Gillette, and that's who I followed. And they presented me with the music, they presented me with what the show was going to be, and I was thoroughly impressed. I mean, it was like nothing I'd ever seen, and immediately I understood. Well, one of the things I feared was, because it was so much, if I would harm myself. But the more I sang the music and the more I understood the show, I knew I would be fine. And I knew I had the training and the chops to do it. And even though I had years of performing experience, this was a bit more intense. There wasn't much for me to adjust to. It was really about me just growing up. And I grew up very quickly in that first year. I got beat up a little bit.
What were some of those? I can only imagine what it's like stepping into the largest circus, into the footprints of these amazing performers. What
Yeah,
was it like?
well, it's territorial, as you can imagine. When you're working with people who have all these peculiar skills, and they're very different from you, circus people are very territorial. And you got to show up and be who they say you are. You better live up to the hype. And they were used to quality ringmasters. The gentleman they had before me, Eric Michael Gillette, was a tremendous ringmaster. In fact, he's still a stable in theater and film and things like that. He does a lot of coaching. He does cabarets. He's a tremendous artist. And he was quite the icon in his own right. And so I had to follow that. And I got to them immediately, really. Actually, my first rehearsal, I got a round of applause, and it was like tremendous. It was like a rush. And so immediately they felt confident that they were in good hands, because that's really what the ringmaster is. The ringmaster is the person who initiates the magic. And the ringmaster is the person that breathes life into each and every act. You're the first performer everyone sees, and you are the catalyst for the energy that is going to be expended throughout the night.
I can imagine that they really are concerned about the quality of the ringmaster, because you're the one who sets up every act for success.
Yeah, you set them up, but you also protect them. Because if life creeps in and, there's an accident, there's a mishap, there's a gap of time that needs to be filled, all those things. And also, you're an ambassador. You're the prime minister, so to speak. You're doing the bulk of the interviews, because you're probably one of the few fluent English speakers
right
on the show. But I mean, and naturally, you're the voice of the show, so you would be doing the bulk of the interviews. And because of the historical ramifications that came with my particular era, my interviews were just, you would have thought I was running for president. It was great, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a tremendous learning experience. It's a tremendous company. In some respects, part of me wishes I would have done it later in my life, because I could have appreciated more. I think I was spoiled in many respects, because they did a lot of things, especially in their infrastructure, that a lot of, I can tell you, a lot of different companies in this business of show could use. Media training was very intense, and I really learned the science of interacting with the press. And I learned it from a tremendous, tremendous teacher and publicist I mean, she was just brilliant. I mean, and she really sold that show in a great way. But you know, Ringling Brothers, generally they would have some really fantastic media people, you know, because creating your narrative matters.
Yeah. So I wonder, have you heard the Polish proverb, not my circus, not my monkeys?
Yeah, I've heard that.
What
Yeah.
I'm wondering what it's like when it is your circus and it is your monkeys. How do you handle when things have the potential of going off the rails, when you have to fill in that, when you're the one that's stepping up and in front in order to corral these territorial performers that are having to deal, you always hear, don't deal with children or animals, and yet that's the circus. How do you
Yeah,
handle managing that?
it's a part of the culture. And you manage it with a great deal of trust in your colleagues. What made the circus what made Ringling Brothers so dynamic really is, it's really in the name circus. It comes from the um, Latin root for circle. And everybody within that circle understood their role, was sure about their role, was sure about their position, and they were clear about who they were in the collective. It was always about the collective, you know? And being the ringmaster, I knew my place. And I also understood that the live band I was with, they understood what to do as well. And the clowns understood. And there are these instincts that have, and the crew understood. There, we have, I mean, there would be minor things that would happen, but they would have an effect on the show. And we just had this synergy, even in the heat of the show, to connect and communicate. Hey, you know, I would see a crew member run past me on the outskirts of the arena floor, and they would stretch out their arms, and that would signal
Is this
me
the
to.
real signal?
Yeah, he'd be running up and down and stretch because maybe he had to fix some
Yeah.
equipment that got stuck or something, and I knew what to do, and I just jump on it, and the band would pick up on that, and so we just had this energy. It was like being in a bebop band, you know. You know, you just knew who was supposed to do what, and you know, nobody had to argue about it. We didn't have to fight over it. We just knew who was supposed to do what.
You know what? There's so much. That'd be a whole separate interview to talk with you about circus culture and the systems that make it work. But I'm going to, maybe this is a challenging question. What was the most important lesson you learned while living on the train?
To make sure you tie everything down. Make sure you have bungee cords. And also to relax. You know, it's you have a right to. You know, we worked hard and we slept hard. You know, because you're doing an average of 11 shows. And it was something my mother used to tell me all the time, but it didn't become real until I was in the circus, and she would always caution me and remind me that you know, first and foremost, people are energy. And as a performer, it's even more intense because you're emitting energy and people are giving it back to you. And you'll often hear some performers who talk about audiences that were a bit lame. And then you'll hear them talk about, oh man, that audience, they really, really got, that's fuel for an artist, you know. I always tell people, you know, go and enjoy yourself when you're at a concert. Go and enjoy yourself because well, hopefully the performer is good, but you know, if it's good and if it's giving you something, please give that energy back to the performer because it's hard. I've been in shows where I know we're just firing it up, and people are they're just, you know, they could care less, and that's draining.
You know what?
It's like,
What you said, I mean, you could develop a whole curriculum around tie it down with bungee cords.
yeah,
Because that's so, I mean, you've got to have it anchored. You've got to have things stabilized. But man,
yeah,
you better be able to stretch.
yeah,
Otherwise, you break.
yeah, absolutely. You know, and the train was, you know, it was sort of like a mini vacation because it was such a privilege to not have to live out of your suitcase. Like most tours, you live out your suitcase, but because we lived on a train, we had apartments on a train. I mean, that was home.
Yeah.
Home only just changed locations, but that was home.
Yeah.
And it felt more so when we were moving and we were traveling to the next city, especially when we would venture out west and the train runs were at least 2 days long. I mean, I love those. You know, you really get to see America go by. You get to see how beautiful this country is. And, you know, we would veg out on movies and, you know, junk food,
Oh yeah.
games and things like that. And there would be a lot of sleep. I mean, we reveled because we worked so hard. It took, you know, being in that show, it could take a lot of energy out of you, you know? I mean, because, you know, once the show starts, it's like, it's just full steam ahead. And you don't really have time to rest in a show week because it's really all about bringing our brand of joy to a particular city at a particular time.
Yeah. Hey, deep, hard-hitting question here. Is it true that the clowns get all the girls?
Yes, it's pathetic but true for the most part, and it's something I've been pondering. I may have to write a book about it. Um, I don't know if it's humor. I don't know if it's, you know, they're amazing. They're amazing patience. Because, you know, for the most part, a lot of those guys, they just would hang around. They just be around. You know, they just be around. And I think just them being, I think there's, you know, clowns kind of have that, what's the phrase? Yeah, they're almost careless, you know, and, you know, women love to fix things. You know, they don't want to put together guy. You know, you
Well,
gotta
I
have
wonder
something.
if it has to do with the improv nature of being a clown, and that they have to be present.
Yeah, one of it. Listen, clowns have tremendous empathy. You know, they have tremendous sympathy. I think that's part of it. You know, I really think that's part of it. They're very resourceful. That's definitely a truth. They're very resourceful. And they're not the. I think there's something to the fact that they're not what you expect. They're not. You know, they're not the tall, dark, and handsome. They're not that. You know, they're not the high school quarterback. You know, they're these. They almost seem average, but they have these tremendous skills and gifts.
Yeah. Well, let's I want to take you down a different track and take you to a specific day and place. Go back to January 14th, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when you first heard that the circus was closing?
Well, I was numb personally. I was numb because I knew it was coming. You would have to be blind not to see it coming. The ticket sales had plummeted, especially when we removed the elephants. For most people, that meant there were no animals. And, and it's funny to me because we're in an information age and people can't hear. They don't know how to take in information, and I tried my best during interviews to remind people we still had the greatest menagerie in the world. It's just, it was lighter. But once the elephants went, that was the end of the show. And so I was surprised that they attempted a new show, and it was innovative and it was a good attempt. And they, it was going to be a 4-year tour. But, and personally, it was going to be my last tour. I'd already determined it was going to be my last tour. I didn't know it was going to be the end of an American institution, which bothered me only because I thought of fans. I didn't really think of myself personally. As a performing artist, you know that eventually you have to move on, adjust, do new things. And I think as a human being, if you don't own it and operate it, there's no security in it, no matter how storied it might be. If it's not yours, if it's not yours, you don't have any security. So I always accepted that it was the business of the Feld family, and they have their reasons. I just felt really sorry for the fans. There were people who really had, many people for many generations, who had a real tremendous emotional connection to the show for various reasons. I'll give you an example. There was a family in Jacksonville, Florida, I met, and I was drawn to them because during the show, speaking of energy, they were sitting in the front row. Mom's dressed like a clown. One son is dressed, has costume on like a clown, dressed like a clown. The other's like a ringmaster, and they were having too good of a time. Everything that happened and everything that we did was a big deal. And I thought to myself, I have to meet these people. And I went over there to, just to say hi. They literally suffocated me with hugs. And it was wonderful. And the mother, she looks up at me. She's a lovely lady. And she says, my son here, the one who was dressed like a ringmaster, she said, he's autistic. You wouldn't have been able to tell because of how he was enjoying the show. And she said, for the first 4 years of his life, he never spoke a word until we came to Ringling Brothers show. And that's when he said his first words. And she said, that's why we have to come to the show. She said it like that. We have to come to the show. And there's so many similar stories like that in various different expressions that's what I thought about on January 14th, 2017. That's who I thought about, were those people, and how they would cope and where they could find that kind of joy again, because it's not in any other form of entertainment. No other form of entertainment has that going for it. Nothing's that pure and high quality at the same time. There's nothing, not cinema, not theater, nothing. I can't think of anything that has that kind of quality and just pure, unadulterated entertainment where your imagination is safe, the imagination of your family and your children is safe, where you will spend, where your money and your time is honored, in such a way, and you get so much content. I can't think of any other entertainment expression that is like it.
So, I mean, it sounds like you said you're planning on leaving the show after that tour anyhow.
Yeah.
So when you heard that not only were you leaving the show, but the show was leaving the world.
Yeah, and that was the hurt, really. That's where the pain happened. That's where it was really, that was gut-wrenching, I mean, you just didn't want that to happen. I wanted to be able to one day, God willing, take grandchildren and brag.
Yeah. So I mean, that probably fundamentally changed. You were probably preparing for the transition. Then you hear this additional news. How did that change how you prepared for your transition?
Well, it sped everything up. Of course, you're thinking about, well, where do I go next? What do I do? But more importantly for me, I had to deal with the trauma of it. There was no way around it. I was with something for 18 years. And you don't just move on so easily. I was tremendously tired physically, and I was mentally drained, and I was in a circus funk, so to speak, because as a performer, nothing else is stimulating. Nothing else is how can it be? Your coworkers can fly, talk to animals, and do daring things. And there are 5'10" elephants, and there's 600-pound lions and tigers. I mean,
that's just another day at work.
Right. I mean, what am I going to do? And that really was at the forefront of my mind. What am I going to do as a performer that's going to be that? Yeah. That's going to give me that kind of, that's going to stir me like that. So, the fact is, I'm in a place where I'm truly remaking myself, and I realize that I have to create something. More and more I realize I have to create something. I can't just go maybe I'll get some Broadway show. Honestly, it would be for the money, because nothing's gonna stimulate me like that.
There's no kind of logical next career step from Ringmaster.
No, and to be quite frank, in the business of show business, because the narrative of circus is so horrid, even to the best of us who, who love it, but unfortunately, it's not respected as it should be. And so nobody really knows what to do with. They don't know what a ringmaster, they don't know what that stuff is. They have no idea that I was singing full out live, huge productions 450 times a year. They don't even know what that means. They don't know that I probably sing the national anthem more than any living human being. It doesn't matter, the history I made, the fact that, we were seen by tens of millions of people.
Well,
it
seems
so many
like,
years.
Let me try this analogy for you, because you have kids, and mine has Legos, and you have such a tremendous Lego set of competencies that have been put together in a very specific way to be ringmaster. It seems like now you have to step back, take those Legos apart, and instead of making a ringmaster, you get to decide how to reassemble those competencies to make a brand new structure.
Yeah, and that's the adventure. That's the adventure, and it's tremendous. It's challenging. It's wearisome, but it's exciting and it's necessary. And so that's the next step. To get a book, to probably create my own shows. Definitely to hit the speaking circuit, probably do some training, things of that nature. But it is to create something brand new, and hopefully that touches on the needs of the public.
So tell me this. I mean, it's been about 2.5 years, and sound like you've made some incredible insights. What do you think is the most important insight you've gained over the last 2.5 years?
Right as of now, it's stay constructively busy, and mindfulness is a real thing. You have to really look out for yourself when you have something like that, when you have such a shift. The worst thing to do is fall into worry and dread and anxiety. But you have to rest in the confidence of your experiences, your faith, the fact that it's just a season and this too shall pass. And you have to, I think you have to get in a place where you're still in motion toward what you know. Whatever that may be, you just do the best you can with whatever you have at the moment. But you keep moving. I think the worst, even worse than what I previously mentioned, is that you end up becoming a deer in headlights, and that's the danger of anxiety and despair and all that stuff, is it clouds your mind so much that you're not able to breathe and allow the creative powers to guide you, because I've almost fallen into that. It's easy to, because suddenly your identity is taken from you.
Yeah,
But how we are.
I've had that same experience with a couple of different times when it wasn't my idea to leave an organization. And the temptation is to, like, I think about, you could sit in a corner in a mirror in your ringmaster uniform, a little bit tattered and old, and just say, woe is me, this is what I was. But it's so important that what you're saying is you got to take off that old uniform and see what's next.
You have to accept reality. Your past doesn't entitle you.
Yeah.
The world is going to keep spinning without you. Evolution is real. And so it's your responsibility, no matter where you are in your life, to always be one step ahead of yourself. Yeah. So, the enemy is comfort. Comfort is a real dangerous enemy, because it's so seductive. We all want to put our feet up. We all want to arrive, but you never do.
And that's a blessing, never to arrive.
Yeah, as the great Andre de Shields said, who just won his first Tony Award after 50 years in the business. He said, the the peak of one mountain is the bottom of the next, so keep climbing.
Right.
And he's right. And you have to have an evolutionary mindset. And I think with new technology, it's pushing everybody to that place where, like you just look around. Every time you look up, there's some new device, there's some new software, there's some new technology. So it is incumbent upon us to look at the world very realistically and understand either you're going to evolve or you're going to
there's a phrase that goes, if you don't like change, you'll like being irrelevant even less.
Yeah, you're going to be a relic.
Yeah.
You're going to be a relic,
So I want to get into a couple of quicker questions here. What advice would you give your 22-year-old self as you began your career?
Get a robust financial education. Seek out opportunity. Stay sharp with the talents you have, and seek out new skills just for the sake of it. Like, really value learning. One of the things I learned about the elite class is they learn for the sake of learning. That's different than average people. Average people, we want to put our feet up. The elite, they could be at the top of their game, and if it means they have to break down everything and start over, they'll do it.
Well, I've got a friend who's CEO of a big electronics company. They make microphones and headphones and all that kind of stuff. He became CEO before he had a college degree. Mm. After he became CEO, he got his degree, got his master's, and got his doctorate.
Yeah.
Just because.
You have to have it. You have to have it in your mind. You have to remember, life comes in seasons.
Yeah.
It's not going to be summer all the time. That's why I think everybody should live in continental weather. I don't think it's healthy to come from these tropical places or these places where there's never any sun. You need to know what a storm feels like. You need to know what it feels like to have the sun beating down on you. You need to know these things because it keeps you alert and aware. It's like Jim Rohn talks about the psychology of the ant, how they work in the summer. In the summer, they live like it's winter. And in the winter, they live like it's summer.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Jim Rohn. I think that place out there that he started in Orlando, the human, what is it? Basically, his corporate athlete training program is amazing.
Oh, give me a second. I'm just going to turn around. I'm picking up my weight.
No problem. Well, as you pick her, let me get this question in before you pick her up.
Okay.
What did you learn as a ringmaster that would help us non-circus folk?
You can handle crisis. You're tougher than you think. And there's something fascinatingly primal when it comes to life, to crisis, to even triumphs. One of the things I discovered when I was a ringmaster is how fluent I was in thinking on my feet, when the unexpected would occur. I also learned that you're the best representative of yourself, and you are the author of your joy. You're the author of your energy, I would say. There's something powerful about you. I think that, to me, was the greatest power of a ringmaster, is that you set the tone. And I think that's something anybody can take in their life, whatever season you're at. You set the tone. You set the barometer as to how your environment should be. Even if things aren't ideal, you can really set how it is you're going to respond, how it is you're going to allow things to affect you. So, I think being ringmaster is being an expert author at how you purport yourself.
So one last question. just for kicks, what's the most recent or your favorite book or album that you've given somebody?
That I've given somebody. Oh, I don't give away books too much. I don't give those away too much. But I did give a wonderful author and friend, and who happens to be my neighbor. She just wrote a wonderful book called Deep Waters Lift Your Gaze. Her name is Kim Clark, and she has a desire to take her message into the prison system. And I gave her the book, The New Jim Crow, which is, talks about the dynamics of the prison industrial complex by Michelle Alexander. I felt good in giving her that, to expand what it is she wants to do. She really is coming from a perspective of someone who is really, she has a tremendous story. She's been through just so much. And the fact that she is she's like ice cream, she's so pleasant. And she's such a driven human being, and a dynamic person, and she really does walk her faith out. And her story is just amazing. And so she has that servant's heart, so to speak, and wanting to share how to really manage through the deep waters of life. And I think she's going to be a tremendous star in that respect. I always respect, and she's an incredible speaker as well. And those are the speakers I tend to listen to. As you know, they're like, the market is saturated with a bunch of talkers. And I say, there's a difference between a preacher and a pastor, right? One guy is just talking, the other one is actually shepherding and just,
Right.
They're discipling, they're doing all those things, they've been through things. They have some scars, they have some,
Well, it's what you talked about with the musicians and opera singers. The kids can't be born into it. You got to have that life experience so that you can speak into other people's lives.
Yeah, even if you're a genius, and I mean, there are people who happen to be freaks in nature.
Yeah.
And even with that, you still have things that just still have to be mined, that you can't escape experience. You can't escape work. You can't escape the trial by fire. Everybody wants to be gold. Nobody wants to go through the furnace.
Yeah. Well, Johnathan, I know that your wife's there and you got to get back to your life. Thank you so much for spending this time. There's so many things that I want to talk more with you about. So maybe we can do this in the future as well. So thank you so much.
Hey, man, I appreciate you thinking of me.
Yeah.
All right.
So thanks a ton. And I want so bad to do this thing. Jody Mayberry does this thing where if he interviews somebody, he lets them ask 3 questions back. But okay, maybe we can do that at a different time because you've been too generous anyhow.
I appreciate it.